Delegate OBannon.
Good evening.
Good to
How
see
are
you.
you?
Great. How are you? Good evening, everyone. My name is Ralston King, Assistant Vice President of Government Affairs at the Medical Society of Virginia. Fortunate that we have Delegate John OBannon here, a physician here in Richmond, and we greatly appreciate him attending and visiting with us. It's been a great 17 years, and as many of you all know, he did lose the election for the 73rd District last Tuesday, but we're so happy that he's here to come spend some time with us. And Delegate OBannon, you've done a lot for medicine. For 17 years, you've done a lot in the General Assembly. Tell us about some of those great efforts that you've
Ralston,
accomplished.
it's been really a fascinating career. I've had the privilege of representing the 73rd District, 1/100th of all the citizens in Virginia for the last 17 years, and have continued to practice medicine. So that's our part-time citizen model in Virginia. We've had an opportunity to do a lot of good things for people. You know, when you're a doc, you practice one-to-one, helping people.
Yeah.
When you get into this arena, you can really help a lot of people.
Right.
And so it's been wonderful to be a part of the Medical Society. I've been a member of the Medical Society since 1980 and have really enjoyed and benefited from the nurturing of organized medicine.
Yeah.
I was involved with the Richmond Academy. I actually chaired the legislative committee at the Medical Society, which was the springboard into the real
Right.
political life.
Right. Past president of the Richmond Academy of Medicine as well. Tell us a little bit about some of your accomplishments that you really have felt that have been the most rewarding at the General Assembly.
Well, it's really interesting. When I first got elected, 9/11 had just happened. And that was a real existential threat to this country. So Virginia at that time put together what we call a Secure Virginia panel with Governor Warner at the time, and former Lieutenant Governor John Hager chaired that, and I was given the task of running what we call the Health and Medical sub-panel. And that included all of the preparedness planning for the hospitals, the health department, and all the first responder pieces that were involved interfacing with public safety. So as you know, most of our hospitals are private, but when these threats happen, they affect everybody. So we really had a great experience. Health department had been decimated, so we took the opportunity to work with the health department to get the epidemiologists up and running and do the all hazards preparedness that we now have in place and functioning really well. And actually that was demonstrated with the Ebola attack, which we just went through.
Right.
And Virginia got good accolades for how well prepared we were for that. But over those 17 years, we dealt with redoing the isolation and quarantine laws. We then moved on and got into the opiate epidemic. I was pleased to carry the bill that pushed Narcan and naloxone out, the Revive program. If we hadn't done that, we'd have been behind the 8 ball on
Right.
getting the Narcan out. We're just beginning to get our hands around that now.
Yeah.
But been involved with that. And last year, a health commissioner asked me to carry a bill to do a targeted needle exchange program in high-risk areas. And a lot of folks thought that wasn't going to happen in Virginia, but we were able to get that through. And
Yeah.
so at least we have that available now if the health commissioner feels the need to use it. So one of the things that's really humbling about getting into elected office is the scope of government.
Yeah.
If you look at health department, social services, DBHDS, you know, we've had all these upheavals with mental health problems, with the Deeds Commission trying to address those things now.
Right.
So having real physicians, you know, Scott Garrett is on that Deeds Commission. So having real physicians in the room and at the table when these decisions are made is really invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And you know, speaking to the opioid crisis, I would like to get a better understanding. You know, this past year, the medical societies worked with the administration and many of you all on passing prescribing regulations at the Board of Medicine. There's still a lot of work to be done. As you know, this opioid crisis does not end today and tomorrow just with those regulations. But what is your belief on day limits, and if we were to put that in the statute, is that something that you feel is a good maneuver?
So we're going in the right direction in something that's hard, because there are all kinds of doctors. They're solo practices, they're big outfits. And so where we need to go is we need to have a plan that captures most everybody, but permits the individual practitioner who maybe never writes an opiate prescription to get pulled into some of this. I have no umbrage with limits. I think you can decide where you want to put those. I think we were, I don't want to use the word seduced, but we were played by the pharma folks and the drug companies a fair amount on this. And so we now need to go back and rein that in. Unfortunately, I fear we may be going a little bit too far, because I now see patients in my own practice who are having a very hard time getting modest amounts of medicine that they need. So this is, I think, a good place for our medical society, as you've done. I mean, you represent the doctors in the state. So the fact that you're down there when these decisions get made is invaluable. And you all have done a good job of representing the profession.
Well, thank you for that. Now, I'd like to touch on another issue that you've been a great supporter of on Certificate of Public Need Reform, and it's a difficult issue. It's something that hospitals, providers, patients, all are affected by it. But from the MSV standpoint, we've been active in wanting to see some COPN reform for the last few years. What is your vision for what that should look like, and do you see that as potentially being reformed here in the coming years? Obviously, politics can play into that, but I'd be interested to know your opinion.
So thanks a lot. I've been a real strong proponent of COPN reform for a very long time. And I came at that actually having served on some hospital boards and watched how these big systems use the CON process in an anti-competitive fashion. And so I basically told all my friends here in Richmond, all three of the systems, said, I'll write a letter of support for any COPN you want. Right. And I filed a number of comprehensive bills. None of those bills repealed it. Right. There are risks to total repeal, but there is, and the real reason when I am still, as an elected person, I think my constituents, the people, citizens I represent, would be better served with some significant COPN reform. You know, our hospitals have got their systems in place. They drive everybody to the big buildings. Patients very much enjoy being able to park somewhere and go and get some imaging. And so I hope that we will be able to continue, and you all have been leaders in this, continue to do significant COPN reform. There are a number of protections that need to be there, which we have had. There are certain things that should be subject to limitations, things like transplant, some of these other things. But my goodness, if you're doing 800 diagnostic casts a year, you ought to be able to do open heart. Right. And yet the system doesn't permit that. Right. So, enough said. Understood.
Very helpful. And this is a loaded question, but as you look towards the future, and at our House of Delegates this past year, we had a variety of different policy measures on single payer and Medicaid expansion, and how do we insure more patients? How do we find a robust insurance market? How do we get access to care for these patients? You know, you said on appropriations, you've seen, the Medicaid budget increased drastically. Tell us a little bit about that.
The pathway Virginia has taken has been to try to carefully reform and structure our Medicaid program to be as efficient as possible, but not do the full-throated expansion. Healthcare actually was a big component of the election this year, and that is largely the result of what's going on in Washington and the inability to make Obamacare better or to replace it. So I think there are caveats to Medicaid expansion that still exist. And I will tell you that there were probably a half dozen states last June that were in special sessions because they had expanded Medicaid, they had misjudged the enrollments. Many of those enrollments were 1.5, twice as many folks as they thought, and then they overspend. And in fact, Arizona, which was one of those private option models, actually wound up de-enrolling some 15, I forgot the number, significant. That's the worst thing you can do. So I hope and I think we will look at some third way or some form of expansion that does not break the bank. And I hope that we can work, our new administration here can work with CMS in Washington, because there's so many things that you could do that would make the dollars flow better. Mm-hmm. You know, Medicaid won't pay $1 for transitional housing. You know, there are lots of things. So, you know, somebody shows up in the ER on Friday night, right, and they don't have a place to live, they get admitted for the weekend.
Right.
There are ways that we could use those dollars, maybe not just sending them to the hospitals, but maybe sending the dollars to the clinics and to systems that cover people, so that the money might follow the person.
Right.
And that person then would have more choice about which system they want to use.
Right, right. Very helpful. And as we kind of shift away from the policy and go back to the politics, and you know, I know this past Tuesday was very difficult for you and many members of your caucus. What do you see now moving forward with this coming year? And obviously, we're still working through what the makeup of the House is going to be. Right now, I think it sits at 51-49. Have you spoken to many of your caucus members, and what do they expect to go on as the Senate still sits at 21-19?
So,
what is y'all's vision?
Politics.
Yeah.
So pragmatically, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see that Ralph Northam is actually a good guy. I think he will be a good governor. But you're going to see politics at its highest as we organize for this biennium, this session. The session is a long session. It does a budget. All the organization happens this session and carries through the short session. So you're going to see efforts on the part of the Democrat Party to flip a Republican in either the Senate or the House. Because if you do that, then you automatically have power sharing, or you flip the control.
Right. And
so I think there'll be a lot of deal attempting for the first few days till we get organized.
Yeah.
I do think that having much narrower margins probably reduces the likelihood of the fringe things, some of the things that have been sort of both sides have thrown out.
Yeah.
And force us all to look at coming together on some of those policy things that would be good for everybody. Right. That's easily economic development, it's easily educational things that make good sense, and healthcare things. I think we really desperately need to work more on transparency. You know, folks still don't have any idea what the ultrasound is going to cost when they go in the hospital.
Right. Yeah.
And I think as you see the insurance market, at least for the individuals, continue to deteriorate with higher deductibles, that people are going to be much more interested in knowing what things cost.
Right, absolutely. Nurse practitioners, you know, this has been an ongoing systemic issue for years on what is the relationship and what makes sense for quality standards, and what could that relationship look like for the future. We've seen about 25 states that do have independent practice for nurse practitioners. I think the physician community has always taken the stance of collaborative practice. There needs to be some sort of relationship for referrals, complex cases, emergency situations. How do you envision, and does your support or opposition to those things change, and how do you envision moving forward on that?
So let me give you an analogy.
I like those.
I think things change in medicine. Things evolve in healthcare. And this is ancient history. I got involved as a neurologist because the physical therapy community wanted something they called direct access. We thought that was terrible. It was independent practice of medicine.
Right.
And over the years, that's evolved to where therapists can practice to their standard. They can see folks, and they have a pathway where they can either refer them or treat them, or if they have a relationship with them, continue to treat them.
Yeah.
That's worked really well.
Right.
So we have now this relationship happening with our nurse practitioners, where we have moved to what we call the collaborative practice model that has turned out to have some flaws.
Right.
And so we're now looking at changing some of that language, and we want to use our limited practitioners to the extent of their ability. My mother was a nurse, and I will tell you that I like the idea of having some kind of relationship. whether you practice as part of a healthcare team, whether you have if you're in an underserved area where there isn't any team, then you maybe have a telehealth connection to somebody at the health department.
Right.
But I am not personally supportive of total independent practice.
Gotcha.
I think what's being discussed is reasonable. Maybe there's a pathway where you get more experience, you get more autonomy. But I like the idea of some sort of connection. And I don't think I think the joint board has been effective and worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, I'll end with a simple thank you, and there's not really much more that we can say because you've been a tremendous supporter of MSV and organized medicine, and for the last 17 years, I know this organization, our leadership couldn't have done anything without you, and you've been there every step of the way, so we really appreciate it. And if there's any final words you'd like to just say about the things that you enjoy being in public service.
I would like to tell anybody that's interested in the political well, I'd like to say this. If you're a physician, you're a member of a profession. And part of the profession is to nurture that profession. And you can do that in the political process. You don't have to run for office. You don't even have to go campaign. You can support your PAC financially. If you're interested, get involved in a political campaign. They're actually a lot of fun. You meet a lot of nice people. It's more fun when you win. But, and I do think if there are folks who are in a community, Virginia's changing. Virginia's becoming bluer. My county has gotten a lot bluer. I'm red. That's one of the reasons why I lost the election. But for anybody that is in an area where they think they might have an interest in running for political office, I would really encourage them to talk to you, to get involved, because there are 100 members of the House of Delegates. We're diverse. And we are much better off if we have physicians down there who can stand up for what we feel is important in our profession.
Absolutely. Delegate OBannon, thank you so much.
It's
been great. We really appreciate it. It's been quite a ride. Thank you.